Let's start with the book. I skimmed through a little bit. It's been a busy week.
Oh, it sure has for you.
Why did you write a book? When did you start this? How did you start this project? And why did you decide a book was the next step for your career?
Well, it's kind of like Oliver North when he said, this is a story that has to be told.
Yeah.
This story had to be told. And I'd have been happy to tell the story just throughout the media and answering questions from the press and commenting, writing op-eds, put little tweets out and those things. But they completely canceled anything I said, and they mischaracterized those things. Sometimes they just assigned me to saying things and mischaracterized it. So it was a long litany of I'll say, false stories that have been built on me for years. And those quotes that go back that people think they're offended by, I don't think they're offended. They just used them so they could feign that. So the story had to be told, and if I were only going to print 8 copies of this book, they would go to my 8 grandchildren, because they need to understand. They know their grandpa, but they don't want to know me through Wikipedia. These are all facts. This is a footnoted book, deep details in it, and everything in it that I can put in there is as objectively true as I can do. And also there have been 8 or 9 people that scoured it, that lived part of that life with me. And if there's anything that's not objective or anything that's not factually correct, tell me. And I had like 1 correction out of all of that. And it was the name of a subcommittee that wasn't precisely right. So, and that was Louis Gohmert, by the way.
So I noticed that it's broken down by years, essentially. It's, you know, so how are people going to perceive this book when they started? Like, I guess cover to cover, do you suggest maybe skipping to specific years? Like, what is the best way to take in everything? Because like most political novels, it's a lot of information and maybe a lot of stuff that people have never really heard of before.
Yeah, and people that have read it now, they tell me that it's a fairly fast read and an easy read, and I wanted it to be that way. But I study history a fair amount, and I was always frustrated when they gave me history moving forward and back on the chronological scale. Well, why am I studying the Stone Age after the Second World War? And so I always had to flip that around in my mind. And so I wanted to put it out in a chronological way so that people could understand the flow of events, so that they're connected. Flow of event is connected in a logical way. Turn the pages of the calendar. Oh, this happened. Then this happened. What were people thinking in the middle of that? And that's how I wrote it that way. There's some in there about my early life. I want people to understand where I found the conviction to walk through the fire as I had to do. And I don't want people to think, I don't want them to read this book and feel sorry for me. There's no reason to feel sorry for me. My life has been so rich with experiences, and yet I want them to know the truth and the facts so that they can better evaluate the people that are at the highest level of politics in the national level and at the state level.
So you spent a lot of years in Congress.
Yes.
There's a lot of stories in here. What do you think are the most important ones that people are going to find within these pages?
We're here in Siouxland, and the best chapter in this book is the story about the Tanzanian miracle kids. And I can't say enough about Dr. Steve Meyer. He's a powerful believer in miracles, and if I didn't know he believed in miracles, I wouldn't have been able to do the part that I did. Those kids would be gone today if we hadn't done what we did, and it was several miracles, a chain of miracles. And that chapter ends up with bringing those children back to Tanzania. My wife Marilyn and I are on the tarmac to greet them. There are thousands of Tanzanians there in their Sunday dress best in that hot sun, not even thinking about the heat. The utter joy of that country, those 3 kids that they thought they'd never see again, walked down that gangplank from Samaritan's Purse's DC-8. And the best one of all was Doreen, who had been paralyzed from the waist down. And nobody would have said that she ever would have walked again. But Steve Meyer called me and said, as there's going to be a miracle, she's going to walk again. And in that call, we set the date on when we were going to bring them back to Tanzania. So that's the best part of the book, and it's the best memory I have in my lifetime. And I want people to understand that.
And I think a lot of Siouxlanders, especially those who have been here the last, 5-6 years, I was just getting my start in media when they were here. So I think that's something that maybe a lot of Siouxlanders can connect with.
And you got to know each of those kids, didn't you?
Yeah.
And the perpetually smiling Wilson, he never stopped smiling.
Never, ever.
That guy. And Doreen she was reclusive, and then she became impish, and she'd tease me and kind of dance around and play games with me. And the mothers, when they understood that their children were going to live, and they just couldn't stop hugging me. And when a Muslim mom hugs a man, you know that they're happy. Yeah, so all that's the happiest memory of my life.
Are you still in contact with those families at all?
Only in the way that through Dr. Meyer. And of course, he's a good friend, and I think actually I'm going to see him later today.
So, a lot of people know your name, know your reputation here in Siouxland. Supporters are going to read your book, but for those on the opposite side of the aisle who maybe say, I don't want to deal with that, I don't want to even pick up this book, what could you say to them to be like, this is my side of the story, this is something that you're not seeing in the media, this is something that you're not reading online? What could you say to them to get them to maybe pick up your book and give it a chance and give you a second chance?
Well, I'd say that some of the things at first, the truth of this doesn't exist anywhere else. It is impossible to pull it out of the media, no matter how you wanted to scour through Google or LexisNexis. You could not do this because it's been so canceled. And I never had any kind of due process. Nobody ever got to hear my side because I've been canceled by the New York Times, the Washington Post, every media publication that I can think of. Even the publishers, I went through about 40 before I found Colonel Oliver North, who was glad to publish it, and I thank him for that. So I'd say to them, think of some of these things. I stand alone in a couple of ways, and that is, there have only been 4 members of Congress who have been removed from their committees by their party. The other 3 are convicted federal felons. And I was removed from a committee for defending Western civilization and a misquote in the New York Times. But that's not really the reason. The reason is because I was effective in the Iowa caucus, effective in the border security and border control piece of it, effective in the work to repeal Obamacare, defending innocent unborn human life, and protecting marriage between a man and a woman. That irritated a lot of people, and it tapped into their bottom line and they saw me as an obstruction to their agenda. So all of that built up, and then it was a triggered event from the New York Times. It was planned, it was strategized. When you read the book, you're going to know that. And so if you're a Democrat and if you're on the left and you don't like Republicans, read this book and you're going to find out about Republican leadership, and it'll give you some ammunition.
So what's next for you after this little book tour, after you published your book? What's next for Steve King?
Well, I'm enjoying my grandchildren. I missed out on so much of that. And, it's been a quarter of a century since I expected to wake up in my own bed in the morning. And I see the sunrise from home and the sunset from home a lot of days. That's all really rich to me. But I also am driven to always be watching and pushing on policy. So we'll see how politics unfolds. I will be looking at some of these state house races, seeing where I can weigh in and help some people. And then we have the Iowa caucus rolling out here. It's already started in a slow way now. And we'll see how that is, but I don't have to do any of it. And my political capital is kind of tied up in this book because, and I would challenge people, if you can find anything in here that's not factual or objective, let me know. I should be called out on that. But in the back of the book, there's a 5-page fact-check document that's been out there publicly for 2 years, more than 2 years, and no one has found a flaw in it, and it completely proves the negative to the allegations that were made, completely. So read the book and find out what the politics are like. And I'm not going to say that Democrats are completely without flaw, but it's more, that we always had that battle, but it's more about the leadership within the Republican Party and what they will do to hold that power. And for me, I've got the flow to do whatever I want to do for the first time in a long, long time. And I don't see me stepping away from this, but I'm going to slow down a little bit and enjoy life.
Have you been keeping up with politics in Washington and some of the debates over there on Capitol Hill?
Well, pretty well. And I'm watching the January 6th Commission, and it's a kangaroo court that's there. And I don't blame Steve Bannon for not honoring the subpoena. I mean, they voted to him guilty or to bring charges on him for contempt of Congress. I don't think it was contempt of Congress. It was contempt of Pelosi's partisan kangaroo committee of January 6th. And you can see that because there's nobody there asking any objective questions, nobody trying to get the facts out. It's all about how they want to send the message. It's all about messaging. And I think they'll keep this thing lit up all the way to the elections next year.
There's a big debate over the debt ceiling as well, and I think it's very debatable on both sides of the aisle, even right down the middle. Everyone has a different opinion. Where do you kind of stand on either raising the debt ceiling permanently or temporarily? What are your thoughts on that?
I would never raise it permanently, for one thing. There are some times when you need to do that temporarily, but it always is the political game being played out. And so the leverage in the Senate that says we're not raising the debt ceiling, that's a political leverage. I think all the senators are going to concede to raise the debt ceiling at some point, but they all want their deal. And it is partisan to a degree. Here's what's completely missing from the debate. And we're spending trillions of dollars, and our national debt's up there knocking on the door of $30 trillion. And I have spent 18 years in there pounding for a balanced budget. There was a balanced budget there the year before I arrived, And the year I arrived, we were dealing with the September 11th, 2001 attacks, standing up TSA, going to war in 2 countries. And then the chairman of the budget committee, Jim Nussel, Iowan, and a really good guy, I went to him and said, "Where's our balanced budget?" And he said, "We can't because of the things I've just said." And I said, "We have to, and we have to call on Americans to tighten their belt in this time of crisis. And if we don't do that," and I said it this way, "we will have the devil's own time trying to ever get a balanced budget again." And I see my 40-year-old sons having worked an entire career in their lifetimes, retiring at maybe age 65, never having seen the federal government balance the budget in their working lifetime. And that's in a nation that's as rich as we are, with all the resources and all the ability we have. If we can't say no to overspending by the government, then, and we're pushing that down on the next generations, and you're part of that. You're going to pay the bills for some of the things I voted against that passed anyway.
Would there ever be a need to completely remove the debt ceiling? I know there's been a talk of that as well in Washington.
I think that'd be a really bad idea. Anything that constrains spending, slows it down, brings about the debate, it saves some of that money. But I would be for, I have been on record, and I've written some of them, balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, so that we're required to balance the budget with with a couple of exceptions, and one of them would be in a time of war, and another one would be if we had a supermajority vote in the House and Senate, and then tie that to the GDP, so we only get to spend a percentage of it. So but that debate hasn't even taken place in Washington in years, and I'm disappointed that there's no sense of fiscal responsibility. And what happens when you get so far in debt that your debt now is greater than our GDP? The Chinese have a surplus, they're loaded with money. And what we're doing is we're borrowing money from the Chinese to spend the money today in this country and loading up the debt on generations yet to be born. And it's just wrong.
So, of all your time in Washington and using that experience, where do you see the country moving in the next 5, 10, even 15 years?
My biggest concern is, and part of it's in this book, Walking Through the Fire, that people can access at steveking.com. But my biggest concern is this, that our culture is being divided. And you can look at social media, and that's a great big part of it. And I'd say even without social media, we may not be getting divided this way. But we go on the internet, and then whatever you write, what you've written 15 years ago, goes off into cyberspace and lives forever. So we've never had that circumstance before. And not only does it live forever, just about anybody can access it and bring it back and drop it in your lap out of context, and if they can start the viral attack, then they go out and cancel people. That's only part of it. Then the algorithms written by the cyber gods, I guess they are, divide us so that, let's just say that you go to things on the left side of the center, you'll see more of those because of the algorithms. I'm going to go to things more on the right side of the center, and I'll see those. And it just migrates to the fringes. Our country is more polarized today because of social media, and if we don't figure out how to sort out truth from fiction, what to listen to, what to read, and how to fix that division that's being created by algorithms and, of course, decisions made by the cyber gods, then we're going to be pitted against each other in 15 years in a way that we'll look back on 1861 and understand what divided this nation for that war.
Is there anything that you wish you could have put in your book that maybe didn't make it into those pages?
Well, I wrote a couple of chapters on what happened when Martin Luther King delivered his "I Had a Dream" speech, and about the content of our character rather than the color of our skin. That was exactly the perfect ideological place for us to be as a nation forever. And shortly after he gave that speech, that ideology was being hijacked into affirmative action, special protected status, quota systems, and when that happens, if you're going to give someone a special reward, you have to take it from somebody else. And that also has divided America, and to the point now where we've got all of these subdivisions. And in the book, it shows you that there are 46 different sexual orientation labels that are self-labeled on people. And I saw in the paper the other day that the Boston Pride Parade, which would be the gay pride parade, was going to be 50 years old this year. They canceled it, and they abolished and abandoned the entire network. There was a multi-million-dollar deal. Not because, I'll say because the gay agenda has been so subdivided, they were fighting among themselves. So I say this because once you start identifying people by self-identified behavior, and you give them special protected status or special rights or subsidize and benefit them, then they start slicing and dicing it again and again, and the next person will say, I deserve more of this pie than you deserve, and the fight begins. So it isn't just liberals and conservatives. It goes in every walk of life. The culture has just focused on those differences. And I say, bring it all together. We're all God's children. Can't we live and let live and love each other according to what would please Him?
So you talked a little bit about your grandchildren. What are you most looking forward to the next several years now that you're out of Washington and kind of, I guess, living a bit of a normal life?
Mm-hmm. Well, time with the grandchildren. This Sunday, we'll come back from church, and all 16 of us will be at our place for a big old egg casserole breakfast, brunch it'll be. And then the grandkids will go out to my pumpkin patch, and they'll choose their jack-o'-lantern, and then we'll have a carving party there in the afternoon. That's just, I'm looking forward to that a lot, and that kind of life and living. And then, you know, as I watch these kids grow up, and I see their intellect form, and their personalities, their sense of humor, their character, and the values that are there, it's just really fun to be able to be part of that. When we raised our own kids and we were busy and we didn't know as much about what we were doing, I'm a better grandpa than I was a dad.
Anything else that I didn't ask you that you think we need to touch on?
Well, I would just say to people, go to the website, steveking.com. I put a lot of my head and heart into this, and once it's written, it was finally a release for me. Once I saw this book in print, it's like, okay, now the story's told, and no one can redact it, no one can take it away. It's out there. They can't burn them all, and so I feel really good about that. And also I want to say this, that I've had the privilege to represent all of Siouxland for 18 years, much of the area, the 6 years I was in the Iowa Senate, and we have the best people in the world here, and it's the best place in the world to live and raise a family. And when I see what we have done, from going back to two-row corn pickers to what's out there in the field today, and tracks on grain carts, and a 4-lane Highway 20, and I got to cut the ribbon on the last stretch of that, and I broke the scissors. I was so enthusiastic. We made a lot of progress. It's a good place to live. We have good educational systems. We have good churches, good people. And I'm grateful to have had all of those years to interact with many, many people all across this. I wouldn't trade those experiences with anybody. And thank you all to Siouxland.
Perfect. I think that's a good way to end it.
Thank you.